Hi, I'm Mary from Seymour Library, and today I'm back with another special video. In today's video, I will be discussing my top 5 recommendations for manga series. Manga means Japanese comic books or graphic novels. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 picks. These are pretty much my top 5 recommendations of all time thus far. They're not in any particular order because I'm not that cruel to myself, but these are ones that I could honestly say to anybody, give this book a try, you will probably like it. So these are my top 5. The first one I'm going to be sharing with you, this is really a classic. It's Fushigi Yugi. It's a really interesting name, by Yu Watase. This book is amazing. This is a ginormous epic fantasy romance. There were originally 18 published volumes. The one that I have and own is actually a condensed version, so there are 3 of the graphic novels in one, so I think altogether there are 6 volumes. The individual volumes are available at the library to borrow, but I have this nice, pretty collectible version. So essentially, this story is a friendship tale, so it starts with 2 friends, Miyaka and Yui, and they discover this book, The Universe of the Four Gods, and somehow Yui is pulled into that universe. And Miyaka, of course, wants to save her and find out what happened to her, so she follows her into the book. Little does she know that time is different between the two, so actually by the time that she arrives in that universe, some stuff has happened to Yui which impact her. And the two end up becoming, well, for lack of a better word, enemies throughout this. And so they both set out on an adventure to find what is known as the Celestial Warriors. They each have 7 that they have to locate, and if they can locate all 7, they can summon the god and get a wish granted. And so the adventure, we really just follow Miyaka, but occasionally you will get glimpses at what's going on with Yui. But it's all about meeting new people. Because of course Miyaka sets out on the adventure and she has to find the Celestial Warriors, so it's uncovering who they are, getting to know them, and then proceeding on the adventure to try to connect with Yui and to rescue her. And Miyaka's biggest wish, of course, is just to get back home and rescue Yui. So if you're willing to take that adventure, Fushigi Yugi. There are actually continuations of Fushigi Yugi, but telling other tales. One is the Genbu Kaiden, which is available in America, and the other one is not yet, and it's also not finished, so hopefully one day. But it's great fantasy, adventure, romance. And it's a classic now. It's been around for a long time. My next recommendation, which is also another classic, and you will know from when I tell you the original title, this has been around for a long time, and it remains to this day unfinished, and I will explain more on that later, but the book is X, or it was originally called X 1999, and the reason being is because it dealt with the end of the world, or possible end of the world, and so before the year 2000, everybody was kind of wondering, did that signify the end of the world? And so there were fictional stories that were written in dealing with that and whether or not, we were heading towards the end. So in the case of X 1999, or just X, we follow the main character Kamuishiro as he is forced to make the decision between whether he is a dragon of heaven or a dragon of earth. And his decision will set up a giant battle that will then determine the fate of the world. In other words, will the world be destroyed or will it go on? And so that's Kamui's biggest decision, but kind of impacting that huge decision is that whichever choice he makes, whether he's a dragon of heaven or a dragon of earth, his best friend is going to be pitted against him as his main enemy. And I just realized that's 2 stories back to back where the 2 best friends are then pitted as enemies. But it does make for a compelling drama. What's brilliant about X is that if you have read any other works by Clamp, who is the authors of this, they're a group of women writers in Japan. If you've read any of their other works, you're possibly going to see those characters within X. So there are definitely return characters, there's return locations, so maybe you don't see the characters, but you'll see mentions of locations that they shop at within this book. So it's really great for the epic universe of Clamp. I'd also recommend any of Clamp's works. I think that they're great storytellers and also great artists, and you can see their artwork develop and change as the years go on. But they're a great group of women creators, and this book, it's so good. So I should actually call it a series. So the biggest flaw is that it remains unfinished, and part of that was as it was heading towards the culmination and the giant end of the story, some terrible things started happening in Japan, including student violence and student suicide. And so the authors decided that they were going to put it on hiatus. It still remains that way to this day, and there's a lot of us loyal fans who are a little bit sad that we may never see the end of X 1999. But I would still say, even though it remains unfinished, one, I kind of almost like that it remains unfinished because you don't know how that ending is going to happen, and is it going to be tragically sad, or will there be, I think it's probably going to be tragically sad, but there's also just the slight possibility that something else could happen, and we don't know that. So it's sad that it's unfinished, but also leaves you kind of room for movement there, I guess. But yeah, it is still an epic masterpiece. I would definitely recommend this. It's brilliant. Fabulous. My next choice has become a classic. I'm going to say that most of these are either going to be classic or going to the kind of modern classics. This one is Fruits Basket, and Fruits Basket is by Natsuki Takuya. This is such a good story, and it's kind of hard to explain the depth of it, but essentially Fruits Basket follows the story of Toru Handa, and she, through a series of very unfortunate events, is homeless and living in a tent in the woods. She ends up happening upon the Soma family, who discover that she's living in a tent on their land, and they invite her to come and stay in their home. And so it just follows her interaction with the Soma family, and through her interactions, she discovers that they are under a curse, or at least certain members of them are, where if they are hugged by a member of the opposite sex, they will become an animal from the Chinese zodiac. This also will include the cat character, who was excluded from the Chinese zodiac because the cat was lazy and didn't attend the banquet. You'll get all that pretty quickly in the book. So you would think it would just be lighthearted, okay, these people change when they're hugged, but actually this family is cursed, and there's a reason for the curse, and so as Toru gets to know everybody within the family, she wants to try to find a way to break the curse that is really holding these people back from living full lives, and it's really keeping them obligated to the head of the family. And it also actually follows whether or not the head of the family is in fact cursed and living a life that they don't want to live. So it's a fascinating look at family and at friendship, and it's worth a read. Fruits Basket. This is another big, long series, but I would say it's really worth it. Give it a try. My next pick, which I have actually talked about in the past, I believe, on our podcast, but my next pick is Orange. And Orange is by Ichigo Takano. Orange is kind of a time travel story, but it's interesting because it talks about the different theories of time travel and how you could actually change things in the past. In Orange's viewpoint, you would not be able to change your current circumstances. If you've seen the Avengers Endgame, you'll kind of know some of the theories that get talked about in this book. But essentially, they don't believe that they can change their current life, but they want to try to change the timeline for a different set of them in the past. And the reason why is to save the life of one of their friends. So they write letters to their past selves and try to encourage them to change events, but it is a big part about whether you could trust a letter that arrives to yourself seemingly from nowhere and then just happens to be written by yourself. You know, can you trust that advice, and can you change anything? And that becomes the main staple of the book. And it also follows just relationships in general, building friendships, how those friendships can last and change. So this is a good book. So I would definitely recommend Orange. And I think all of the ones I'm recommending are available at the library, so you can just do a search for them. You can place them on hold now and pick them up. My final choice is another huge, epic story, but it's Full Metal Alchemist. This one has definitely become a modern classic. It is so engrossing, but this is the story of two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, and when they are small, they lose their mother, and so they try to resurrect her using alchemy, and it goes horribly, horribly wrong. Alphonse actually loses his body, and so in order to save him, in a way, Ed attaches his soul to a suit of armor, and in both these steps, Ed ends up losing an arm and a leg, which is horrible. And the two brothers must kind of, one, learn to live with that change. Now, in the series, Ed does get an automal leg and arm, but it's not easy. His main goal, of course, remains to get Alphonse his body back and not just be this suit of armor, because how unfair is it for his younger brother to be stuck inside of this shell and to not have real human interaction and contact. So, in order to do that, Ed becomes an alchemist. He is actually the Full Metal Alchemist, even though you're like, but Alphonse is all metal. That doesn't mean that. It's just his title that's assigned to him by the military. And the story ends up becoming this huge, grandiose story, but in a good way, of really political intrigue and relationships and dark, seedy things that are happening and overcoming that. And of course, still at the heart of it is the relationship between the two brothers and them trying to get back their lives that have been so messed up since their, well, mistaken choice from childhood. So, Full Metal Alchemist, epically good, such a good choice. And even though these all are pretty long and have the really big series, they are quick reads. So it may seem daunting, but if you like good literature, all of these choices are fabulous choices. They have excellent character development, they have fabulous artwork as well, and the storyline, the plot is just so good. The pacing is excellent. These are equivalent to any wonderful novel that you could read, and so I could just highly, highly, highly recommend any of these series. These are my top 5 choices, probably of all time, but there's a lot of other fabulous choices out there as well. I will make one author recommendation, because I can't just give it up at 5. But an author that I enjoy reading is Yo Sakisaka. Yo tells stories that are so human-based. They're really slice-of-life pieces, and really deal with interpersonal relationships. So the first one I read of hers was Strobe Edge, and it deals with a girl who has a crush on a boy, and of course it's not that simple. You can't just have that, but this tells their story. The second one, which I actually watched before getting to read this because it wasn't published in America yet, is awhile Ride, or Blue Spring Ride. This is a great tale, another boy and girl story, but the boy's story is so good. There's such emotional depth in it. It's fabulous. And then this is her newest work that's published here, Love Me, Love Me Not. And so far, so good. It's pretty cute. Friendship tale, but also a crush story, and how those things mix and interact. So, any of these, also highly recommend. They're all published by Viz. So, that is my top 5 for manga recommendations. Be sure to check out my graphic novel recommendations that I made earlier. and give graphic novels and manga a try. Even though the stories are visual, they often have very complex and in-depth characters and interpersonal relationships and just great plotting otherwise. So if you've been holding back on reading graphic novels, give them a try. Now is your chance to do so. I've given you some great picks that even if you're a reluctant graphic novel reader, you should be able to get into and really enjoy. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!